Hey, what's up guys? Today in this video, I'm going to show you how to use the latest Type ORM with NestJs. So I have created a series on my YouTube channel, which is using NestJs to create a quiz manager. And when I started at that time, we had an older version of Type ORM, but then Type ORM has come up with a newer version where there are a lot of breaking changes. A lot of you have been facing problems with that series, specifically in the migration. So I thought it is important that I create a video where you first understand how you can use the latest version of TypeORM with the latest version of NestJs so that you can create a new project. And in the subsequent video, I will also try to see what are the steps which are required to upgrade my existing NestJs Quiz Manager application to the latest version of TypeORM. So without wasting much time, let's get started and see how we can create a new NestJs project and implement TypeORM. So the first thing that we will need to do is actually look at the official documentation and understand how to create a new NestJs project for those of you who are not familiar with it. So I have already executed this particular command, which has installed the Nest CLI as a global dependency on my machine. So I am able to type nest and it is giving me all these things. If you don't have this, I strongly suggest you first run this command and get that thing done. Once you get this thing on your terminal, it will mean that everything is installed properly. So obviously the next command which I need to execute is nest new project name. So why don't we do nest new type ORM? Let it do its thing. It has created a few things on my project and it is asking which which package manager do I need to use. I will go with the default one, which is npm for now. So I have fast forwarded to the part where everything is done and now I have the project installed. Let's go inside the folder, open up it in Visual Studio Code, and let's understand what has happened. So it has installed, it has bootstrapped the basic things which are required for our typical NestJs project. So that we have our main TS where the entire bootstrapping is happening. Then we have our app module, one controller, things like that. And also we have our node modules folder, which obviously doesn't show on my VS Code. I have some ignore settings because of which it is not visible. But yeah, that's installed right now. With this in place, what I need to do is install a few dependencies which are required for TypeORM to work. So I have a database on MySQL localhost called Quiz. This is the same database which I was using for my quiz manager, but I have cleared everything out. It's a basically empty database. We haven't done anything. We will need to install a few dependencies right now. So let's understand what are the different things that we will need. We'll do npm I, we'll add NestJs TypeORM, we'll add TypeORM itself, because these two dependencies are obviously required. And on top of it, I will also require MySQL 2, which is the module which I will require for TypeORM to communicate with MySQL. If you're using Postgres, you will have a different dependency. If you're using SQLite, you will have a different dependency. But this one, because I'm using MySQL, I prefer the MySQL 2. This is, I think, the same thing which I have done for my Nest Quiz Manager as well. Let me quickly look at the package.json. So this is my dependencies. As you can see, I should have TypeORM here, which is the NestJs, intermediate module. I have MySQL 2 and I should have TypeORM here as well. So with that done, let's hit enter and let it do its thing again. So we have fast forwarded into getting all the dependencies done. And now let's start configuring certain things. So first of all, let us create a new resource. So why don't we do NestJ resource user? What it should do is it will ask you what transport layer do you use. I will say REST API. Would you like to generate CRUD entry points? Yes, I do. It's doing a few things. It will install a few packages, and then if we look at our code, right, inside the source folder, now we have a new folder called user. This is the module that we just created. Inside the app module, we will have an import of the user module. And obviously inside the user module, we have all our required files. But a few important files to note are entity, okay, and obviously the user module. Okay, so with this done, we are ready to start configuring our TypeORM into the NestJs project. So the first thing that I will do is go inside app module, and inside here, what I will do is maybe the first one will be TypeORM module dot for root. Okay, and I will have the second dependency as user module. Now, this for root will expect an object, and this object will obviously depend on the kind of database driver that you're using. So for example, we will first need to define the type. Once you add the single quote, you will see all the supported drivers. We are going to use MySQL. Okay, don't confuse this with the package JSON MySQL 2. They are two different things. We are saying that the type of driver or database is MySQL, but even MariaDB will use that. However, for Node to understand MySQL, we use the MySQL 2 package. Okay, the host is going to be localhost, and the rest of the definitions like username, password, everything will come in. All right, so we have all the entries in here. As we said, type is MySQL, host is localhost, username, password, the database that I'm going to use. And then this particular thing tells TypeORM where to look for entities. Now, those of you who have viewed my previous series, you will understand what is the role. But those of you who are new to TypeORM or don't know what entities are, basically these are the representation of your table in the application, as you can say. For example, if you have a users table, then you will have an entity called user. For example, we do have that. Inside entity, we have user entity, which ideally should map to the table of user, and each row in that table is basically an instance of the user model, theoretically. Okay, that's how you can imagine those things. And we are going to use the entity.js file, even though we are using TypeScript, because these things work on the compiled code and not on the TypeScript version. So you have to understand that these things are important. Okay. So with this done, one more thing which I will do initially is have synchronize true. This is a good thing when you are doing your development. What it does is basically anytime you have a new column in your model, it will automatically create that in the database. However, it is highly recommended that you turn it off in production, because you don't want to randomly have tables appear through synchronize, because there are certain migrations where it can create some problem for you. Okay, so this is done. Ideally now, if I run my application, npm run, I think, let me see, npm run start dev, npm run start dev. Things are working, but if I go to my database, I don't see any change. I'm clicking refresh, nothing is happening. Why? Because although I have defined quite a few things in my module, but there is nothing that needs to be converted into a table. Why? Because the user entity is empty. So let's go ahead and add some stuff in here so that it is ready to create a table. So now those of you who doesn't have too much knowledge about Type ORM or NestJs with its dependency, you might have to refer to my previous videos. But what I have done over here is, to give you a basic idea, I have injected this particular thing called entity, and that's how Type ORM knows that this is going to be a database table on its own. Okay. This model will define all the columns. The first one being ID, which I'm saying is going to be a number, and I need to add some attributes so that Type ORM understands what kind of column that is. So for example, we have something called as primary generated column. And the next one, email, that's a string field, and we can have column here. Okay, I'll add unique as true as well, maybe. Fair enough. This is done. Now let's see if something changes. It does. We have a user table, as you can see, and in that I have ID and email. If I add one more, for example, name, that's a string. This is only for those those of you who are new to this thing. Ideally, I strongly suggest you go to the previous series and look at it, because this is primarily on TypeORM's latest version. But if I now save, right, I'll quickly do that and see the application will start. And now if I hit refresh, can you see the name has come over here? This is only happening automatically because the synchronize is true. Okay. Now this is done. This is working on a model where the development can happen quite smooth. But this is not how we would typically run our production applications, or this is not how the development will happen once the app is ready to hit production. Okay, there's something called as migrations that we need to run. Migrations are your way to version control the changes on the database. Okay, every time you're trying to add a column, delete a column, add a table, doing any kind of database structural changes, a migration should be created. So we'll start with an initial migration. Now TypeORM comes with its own CLI, which allows you to run these migrations. But to do that, the problem is you will need TypeORM to, the CLI to send a data source. In TypeORM latest version, everything is now a data source instead of a connection. So what we will do is, like if I show you my previous code, right here, if you see the config and other things were using TypeORM CLI, right? I had a source config TypeORM config migrations.ts. So let me quickly show you that source config and TypeORM, right? I had two configs. I had a normal configuration and one was for migration. This is specifically for CLI. Now we don't need to do this. What I will do is, at the root level, I'll create a folder called db and then have data source.ts. And inside our data source.ts, we will export a constant called data source options, which is of type data source options, coming from TypeORM. This is an object. And now if you see, it has all those stuff which we had defined in our app module. So why don't we cut it from here, paste it over here, and get rid of the synchronize true. And now also add a path where all the migrations will be stored. So as you can see, even with migrations, we are dealing with the JavaScript files and not the TypeScript files, because TypeScript is not getting used while these things are executed. We'll also create a variable called data source, that is new data source, and we pass this option over here, because if you see, it expects options which is of type data source options. Okay, that's how the constructor works. So we have this, and we will need to export this as well as a default thing. So data source. Now let's go inside our module, and what we will do is import that same data source. Okay, this is going to be the data source options. Let's look at that. For root is TypeORM module options. So we need to send the options and not the data source per se. So let's do that. Okay, this is done. Now, the question which might come, let me close this, is what is this data source going to do? So, well, for the type ORM to work, what we need to do is, this data source is exported default, right? So inside our package JSON, we need to put a few things. Let's open it up, get some real estate. So we will run type ORM, and we will give the path of the data source JavaScript file. Okay, so this is how the type ORM has been defined. Now there are 3 more things which we will like to add for migrations to generate, run, and revert. Now to save time, I'm pasting these things over here. As you can see, the type ORM obviously needs to run with the file which are built. I forgot an and over here. Now migration generate is basically me running this thing with the argument migration generate. Then we have run, and if we want to revert, we add that. So first of all, why don't we first of all, we will close the app, right? It says cannot find app controller. Why is that? Let's see. Application should run without any issue. App controller is missing. I think there is some problem. Let's look at what could be the problem. I think for root, data source options is fine, user module is fine. I'll just delete this folder maybe, and let's see. Okay, this is working. Why don't we add one more terminal? Now, I mean, the application code is not going to change now, so that's fine. And synchronize is off. So if I delete this table, now my entire database is clean. And what I will do is I'll execute first command, which is npm run. Let's quickly look at that. I think I should have that npm run generate. No, migration run, right. Migration generate and new migrations. So what am I doing? I'm running migration generate as per my package JSON definition, and I'm passing the argument where I'm saying that it should go inside db migrations new migration. So let's run this and see what happens. It says a file has been generated successfully. Let's look at that. db migrations, yes, this is something which got created. Create table user, id not null, auto increment, email, varchar, right? So everything is here. That's nice. Now the real benefit of migration is, first let us do npm run migrate run. which is the no. What is the command then? Migration run. Oh, it's migration. So what it will do is basically it will try and understand what is there in the database as of now. Let's try and understand. So select version as version. It found information from the information schema columns. Okay, that's all fine. It figured out that there is no migrations, so it first created a migrations table. Then it tried to look for quiz.migrations, migrations order by ID. 0 migrations are already loaded in database. 1 migration were found in the source code. 1 migration or new migration must be executed. So basically what happened is it figured out that the database was empty. It first created the migrations table. It understood that this new migration needs to be executed, and it created that table. Now, let's just say for the sake of this tutorial, we add one more column. Ideally, it should have been there from the start because email and password are required right from the start. But we just added here. So I'll execute this command and say add new password column. Now, what will it do? Again, it will understand what is the current schema looking like. It will see that. Let's first open up the file. Right. So as you can see, it already only added alter table add password. Why? It looked at the schema and figured out that the password field is missing. Everything else is fine. So I just need to add the password field. So what it did, it created that. And if you see in the migrations, oh, my bad. Sorry. I need to run that. So again, 1 migration are already loaded in the database. 2 migrations were found. New migration is the last executed migration. 1 migration or new migration to be executed. That's basically what has happened. So it executed the second one, which is add new column, add new password column. And inside our database, now we have email, name, and password. So this is how migrations work in NestJs with the latest version of TypeORM. I already had a series and I already had videos on how you can configure TypeORM in NestJs, but that was TypeORM, I think what version? 2 point something. Let me see, package.json. Where were we? TypeORM, yes, 0.2, whereas the latest version is 0.3, and there are quite a few breaking changes. Even with this, right, there are quite a few database query level things which has happened. Some of them are quite nice, actually. I was waiting for them. So yeah, try it out and see how things go for you. If you have any problems, feel free to comment below. And in the next video, I'll try to see how I can upgrade the existing application to the latest version of TypeORM. Thanks for watching, guys. If you like this video, do click on the thumbs up icon and don't forget to subscribe to my channel.